He lived in a small apartment on the edge of the city, the kind of place that people only noticed if they were really paying attention. From the outside, the building was old, with faded paint and a few cracks in the walls, but inside, it held the quiet rhythm of his life. Every morning he would wake up at the same time, make himself a simple breakfast, and then sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching the world wake up. People passing by never noticed him, and that suited him just fine. He liked the silence, the calm, and the small, steady routine that made life predictable and safe. Most of his neighbors knew him as polite but quiet. He always said hello with a small nod and a soft smile, and that was the extent of it. He never joined in on conversations in the hallway or at the mailbox, and he rarely attended building meetings. Some people thought he was shy, others thought he was just private. Few guessed that behind his quiet exterior lay a mind full of thoughts, feelings, and memories that he rarely shared. He had lived through moments that shaped him, some happy, some heavy. Music had always been his companion. In the corner of his apartment stood a piano. It was not shiny or new, but it had character. The wood was slightly worn, and a few keys were a little sticky, but it had a warmth to it that no modern instrument could match. He had learned to play as a child and had never stopped. Music had always been a private world for him, a way to express what he could not put into words. When he played, time seemed to stretch and fold around him. Each note was a conversation with himself, a release, and sometimes a reminder of things he could not say out loud. Despite his love for music, he rarely played for anyone else. Friends he had made over the years knew that he liked music, but they had never truly heard him play. Invitations to gatherings were often declined, not because he disliked people, but because being in the spotlight, even for a moment, felt uncomfortable. There was a quiet strength in him, a depth that few had noticed. He listened more than he spoke, observed more than he participated, and in that he found a sense of peace every day. After his morning routine, he would take a walk. The streets were busy, filled with people hurrying to work, school, or other destinations. He liked the feeling of walking through the crowd without being seen, feeling part of the world, but still separate. Sometimes he would stop at a small park, sit on a bench, and watch children play. Their laughter reminded him of simpler times, times when life had been full of wonder and light. He often smiled quietly to himself, remembering his own childhood, the way he used to run and play without a care in the world. He worked at a local shop, a small place that sold books, stationery, and other everyday items. The work was steady and predictable, just the way he liked it. Customers came and went, many of them familiar faces, and he treated each interaction with quiet kindness. He never rushed anyone, never grew impatient, and never tried to be the center of attention. His coworkers liked him well enough but didn't know much about him. He rarely spoke of his personal life, his past, or his passions. To them, he was simply a reliable, gentle presence in the shop. In the evenings, he would return to his apartment and prepare a simple meal. Cooking was another quiet joy for him, a way to create something tangible and satisfying. He didn't need elaborate recipes or fancy ingredients. A well-cooked meal, a little music, and a cup of tea were enough to make him content. Sometimes he would sit by the window after dinner, listening to the sounds of the city as it shifted from day to night. Sirens, footsteps, distant laughter, and the hum of traffic became a soft symphony that accompanied him until he retired for the night, though his life seemed ordinary. He carried memories that few could imagine. He had experienced moments of loss, moments of joy, moments that had shaped the person he had become. Music was always the thread that connected all of these experiences. A way to hold on, to remember, and to express feelings that were too deep for words. The piano in the corner of his apartment was more than an instrument. It was a companion, a friend, a witness to the quiet unfolding of his life. He rarely thought about recognition or fame. That was never the point. The music existed to soothe, to reflect, and to connect with himself. Sometimes he would play late into the night, letting the notes flow freely, filling the apartment with sound. Neighbors occasionally heard faint melodies drifting through the walls, but they never knew who it was or what it meant. To him, it was enough that the music existed. that it could transform an ordinary evening into something beautiful. Despite his quiet nature, there were moments when he longed for connection, moments when he wished someone could truly understand the depth of his world. He had friends, but most interactions stayed on the surface. He wanted to share his music, not for applause or praise, but for understanding, for the chance to show a piece of himself that words could never convey. Yet, he always held back, unsure if anyone could truly hear what he had to say without judgment or distraction. On certain days, he would take long walks after work, venturing to parts of the city he rarely visited. He liked to observe life from different angles, noticing small details others overlooked. The way sunlight fell through leaves, the sound of footsteps echoing in empty streets, the faint scent of rain in the air. These moments fed his imagination and often found their way into his music. Each walk was a journey, a way to collect experiences that would later transform into melodies on the piano. Friends occasionally invited him to gatherings or outings. He would politely decline, often giving vague reasons about needing rest or having work. Deep down, he wanted to go, wanted to be part of something larger than himself, but the thought of attention made him uneasy. His shy demeanor often masked the richness of his inner life. People saw calmness, perhaps even dullness, but inside, his mind was vibrant, alive, and constantly reflecting on the world around him. He had a small circle of people who truly knew him. These were friends he had met over years, people who had shared laughter, conversations, and quiet moments. With them, he felt comfortable enough to let fragments of his true self show. He still didn't speak much, but there was a subtle understanding, a recognition that words were not always necessary. Music was the language he hoped one day to share more openly. The apartment itself reflected his personality. Simple, clean, and functional, with a few personal touches. A bookshelf filled with worn books, a small collection of photographs, and a few mementos from travels and experiences. Each object had meaning, each placement intentional. The piano sat in the corner, slightly worn but inviting, as if waiting for the right moment to reveal its magic. The room had a quiet warmth, sense of life lived thoughtfully and deliberately. He never imagined that anyone outside his close circle would ever see him differently. He was content with his routines, his quiet walks, his work, and his music. Recognition, attention, and admiration were not part of his desires. Yet there was a subtle longing, a curiosity about how the world might respond if he ever let his music speak beyond the walls of his apartment. Little did he know that change was approaching in a way he could never have anticipated. A simple gesture from friends, an idea born from care and thoughtfulness, was quietly forming in the background. It was a gesture that would soon bring him into a spotlight he had avoided for so long. It was a surprise that would test his comfort, his humility, and ultimately reveal the extraordinary depth of the man everyone thought they knew. For now, he continued his quiet life, unaware of the momentous shift about to arrive, still wrapped in the calm, predictable rhythm of his daily world. His friends had noticed how quiet he had always been. They knew him as a kind, gentle person who rarely asked for anything and never sought attention. They also knew the piano in his apartment was more than just furniture. It was a place where he poured his thoughts and feelings, a window into his soul that he rarely opened to anyone. One day, as they met at a small cafe, the idea came up almost by accident. It was simple at first, a casual thought, but it quickly grew into something bigger. They wanted to do something special for him, something that would show how much he meant to everyone around him. The plan started with small details. They debated over whether it should be a simple gathering or a larger celebration. Some wanted it locate a few friends and maybe some family, while others thought it would be meaningful to invite more people whose lives he had quietly touched. Every suggestion led to another, each one building on the excitement of surprising him. They talked about decorations, food, and music, but always kept in mind that he was a man who valued simplicity. Nothing should feel forced or flashy. They wanted the surprise to feel natural, warm, and full of love. In the days that followed, they divided tasks carefully. Some took care of sending invitations, carefully wording each message so it wouldn't give away the secret. Others focused on food. thinking about the kinds of dishes he liked and how to present them in a way that felt homey and comforting. Someone suggested creating a small playlist of his favorite songs for background music. But they all laughed at the idea that his own piano playing might outshine anything they could prepare. Deep down, they hoped he would play, even though they weren't sure how he would respond. They shared stories of him while planning the party. Each person had moments they cherished, small experiences that seemed ordinary at the time, but revealed the quiet impact he had on their lives. One friend remembered how he had once stayed late to help fix a problem that no one else noticed, quietly making things better without expecting recognition. Another talked about how he had listened when they needed to talk, never interrupting, never judging, just being there. These memories filled the planning process with warmth and a sense of purpose. They weren't just planning a party. They were celebrating someone who had quietly made a difference. The friends knew they needed to be careful. He was not someone who enjoyed being the center of attention. They wanted the moment to be genuine, to feel like a natural celebration of who he was, rather than a performance meant to impress. They discussed ways to ease him into the idea without making him uncomfortable. Some suggested pretending it was a casual get-together, with familiar faces and familiar food, so that the surprise wouldn't feel overwhelming. Others suggested giving him small hints to prepare him, though they ultimately agreed that the element of surprise should remain as the day approached. They started gathering decorations and arranging the space. They chose warm colors, simple banners, and subtle lighting that would create a cozy atmosphere. No glittering balloons or flashy signs, just a space that felt welcoming and comfortable. The food was prepared with care, dishes he liked, and snacks that reminded everyone of time spent together. Even the arrangement of the chairs and tables was considered, leaving a small space near the piano, just in case he felt inspired to play. One friend brought up the idea of asking him to play, unsure of how he would react. They spoke quietly, careful not to reveal the plan to anyone else, and wondered if he would feel pressure. But others reminded them that he loved music, that the piano was a place where he expressed himself more than words ever could. They agreed to leave it to chance, hoping that if he wanted to play, he would, and if not, the evening would still be meaningful. The idea of him playing created a quiet excitement among them, a sense that the ordinary could become extraordinary in that moment. The night of the party arrived, and everything was in place. The room was warm, filled with the subtle aroma of food and the soft hum of conversation as friends and family began to arrive. Everyone moved quietly, sharing smiles and whispered excitement. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, unaware of the small, intimate celebration taking place. Inside, the air was electric with anticipation, the kind of feeling that comes when something special is about to unfold. As he approached his apartment, unaware of the plans inside, his friends waited with a mix of nervousness and excitement. They had rehearsed nothing, relying entirely on the natural unfolding of the evening. They knew him well enough to believe that if they created a comfortable, loving environment, he would respond in his own way. And so, when he opened the door and saw the room filled with familiar faces, laughter, and gentle decorations, his eyes widened. For a moment, he simply stood there, taking it all in. The quiet man at the center of a surprise he never expected. The greetings were warm but not overwhelming. Friends stepped forward one by one, sharing smiles and small words, letting him feel the affection without crowding him. He moved slowly into the room, taking in the details, the effort, and the care that had gone into making the space feel like a celebration of him. There were no grand speeches, no expectations, just a quiet acknowledgement that he was valued, that his presence had meaning. The atmosphere was light, but beneath it lay a depth of feeling that was tangible, almost electric. People began to share small stories, gentle recollections of time spent together, moments that revealed his quiet impact. Laughter bubbled up here and there, but it was the kind of laughter that felt warm and intimate, not loud or attention-grabbing. They spoke of times when he had helped them without fanfare, listened when they needed someone to hear them, and simply been present in ways that mattered more than words could convey. Each story was a thread, weaving a tapestry of affection and respect that filled the room. At one point, someone suggested moving closer to the piano. The room quieted slightly, and he looked at the instrument in the corner. For a moment, he hesitated, unsure if he should sit. The friends watched him, giving him the space to decide, their hearts quietly hoping. When he finally approached the piano and rested his fingers on the keys, a hush fell over the room. It was not a formal moment, not a performance. It's just a man connecting with the music that had always been his companion. The first notes were soft, tentative, almost as if testing the water. But then they grew, spreading through the room, filling the space with a richness and emotion that caught everyone by surprise. Conversations faded, smiles softened, and people leaned forward, captivated. The music was personal and powerful, touching something deep in everyone present. It was not about skill or technique, but about honesty, feeling, and connection. Each note told a story, whispered memories, carried emotions too complex for words as he played. The friends exchanged glances, realizing that this was more than a simple surprise party. It had become a moment of revelation, a window into a world they had never fully seen. The quiet man they thought they knew was revealing himself in the most authentic way possible, not through words, but through music. And in that revelation, everyone in the room felt a shift, a recognition that ordinary moments could hold extraordinary beauty. The night continued with music, laughter, and quiet reflection. People shared food, stories, and smiles, but the piano remained the heart of the evening. It was not about performance or applause, but about presence, connection, the subtle power of someone showing their true self. By the end of the evening, the room was filled with warmth, gratitude, and a sense of shared experience that would linger long after the lights were dimmed. He returned to his apartment afterward, exhausted, but quietly elated. The music, the surprise, and the gentle attention had touched something deep within him. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly seen, not for achievements or words, but for who he was. The piano had spoken for him, and in doing so, it had transformed a simple gathering into a night that would be remembered by all present. In the quiet aftermath, he knew that life could hold unexpected moments of joy, and that sometimes opening oneself to others could lead to experiences more meaningful than anything imagined. He approached the piano slowly, feeling a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. The room around him was warm, filled with familiar faces, but he still felt a small, nervous flutter. It had been a long time since he had played for anyone other than himself, and yet something about the night felt different. The gentle encouragement in the eyes of his friends, the quiet warmth of the room made him feel safe enough to take that first step. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, testing the familiar shape and texture, and then he began to play. At first the music was soft, almost a whisper, as if he were easing himself back into a world he had kept private for so long. The room fell silent, not out of fear or tension, but out of anticipation. People leaned forward slightly, drawn in by the gentle melodic flow. Even those who did not know music well could sense that something special was happening. Each note seemed to carry a story, a memory, a feeling that transcended words. The quiet man who had always been reserved was speaking through his music, revealing a side of himself that few had ever seen. As the notes continued, the melodies grew stronger, more expressive. He closed his eyes, allowing the music to guide him, to pour out emotions he had held inside. The room seemed to transform with the sound, as if the walls themselves were listening. People felt the music in their chests, in the gentle tightening of their hearts, the quiet tears forming in the corners of their eyes. It was not just sound. It was a bridge connecting him to everyone present, language they all understood without words. Some friends watched in awe, exchanging looks that said what words could not. They had known him as kind and gentle, but this was something more. This was depth, passion, and vulnerability laid bare. They realized that the shy, quiet man they had always admired in small ways was capable of moving people profoundly. The piano, worn and familiar, seemed to become an extension of him, a vessel carrying not just notes, but the essence of his life experiences, the laughter, the losses, the joys, and the quiet reflections. As the melody continued, the emotions in the room shifted. Laughter and conversation had faded, replaced by an attentive stillness. Even those who had come expecting a casual evening were captivated, drawn into the world he was creating with each keystroke. The music seemed to tell stories without words, memories of childhood mornings, comfort of simple routines, the quiet moments of connection with friends, the ache of experiences never spoken aloud. It was personal and universal at the same time, a reminder of the beauty that exists in the simplest, most honest expressions of self. He did not rush, nor did he pause unnecessarily. The flow of music mirrored the flow of thought, each note leading naturally to the next. Sometimes soft and delicate, sometimes bold and commanding, the performance was a reflection of his inner life. People in the room found themselves caught in the tides of sound, experiencing emotions that were both familiar and new. Some felt joy and hope, others a gentle sadness, all carried along by the authenticity of the moment. The quiet man at the piano was no longer just a figure in the background. He was the heart of the room, commanding attention not through words, but through the truth of his expression. The friends who had planned the evening watched, hearts swelling with pride and affection. They had wanted to honor him, to show how much he mattered, but they could not have predicted the effect his music would have. It was as if the piano had been waiting all this time for the right moment, the right audience to reveal its magic. And there he was, unassuming and gentle, yet capable of creating a moment that would linger in everyone's memory forever. The silence in the room was not emptiness. It was reverence, shared acknowledgement of something extraordinary unfolding in what had started as an ordinary evening. Some attendees found themselves closing their eyes, letting the music wash over them, carrying them to places both remembered and imagined. It was an intimate journey, each note touching a part of the soul. Even those who had never known him well felt a connection, a recognition that they were witnessing a rare and profound glimpse into someone's inner world. The piano, imperfect in its age, became perfect in its ability to convey emotion. Each key pressed with intention, care, and unspoken meaning. He paused briefly, just enough to catch his breath, then continued. The room was still, save for the subtle rustle of movement, the soft exhalations of people moved beyond expectation. No one dared break the spell with conversation or applause. They understood that this was not a performance in the usual sense. It was a revelation, a sharing of self that transcended normal social boundaries. And in this sharing, the quiet man who had always been reserved found a form of freedom, a release, and a profound connection with those around him. As the evening progressed, the music shifted, reflecting the natural flow of emotions. There were moments of playful lightness, echoes of laughter captured in melody, followed by passages of deep reflection and tenderness. The room responded in kind, subtle movements of heads, soft smiles, occasional tears, all marking the impact of what they were hearing. It was a communal experience, yet intensely personal for each individual. They were not just listeners. They were participants, feeling the story unfold through sound and silence. He did not look up often, yet he could feel the presence of the room. The friends who had orchestrated the surprise glanced at each other, quietly awed by the depth of expression unfolding before them. They had hoped for a moment of joy, perhaps a brief song to share, but what they witnessed was transformative. The music carried with it authenticity, vulnerability, and power, a rare combination that left everyone breathless. In those notes, the quiet man spoke of his life, his struggles, his triumphs, his joys, and his sorrows. It was intimate and expansive at the same time. Time seemed to slow as the music unfolded. Hours could have passed in minutes, or minutes in hours. The room existed only within the sound of the piano, the shifting emotions, and the shared experience of connection. People felt as if they had entered a different space, removed from the ordinary constraints of daily life. And in this space, the man who had always remained in the background became the central figure of something extraordinary, a creator of beauty that touched the hearts of everyone present. Eventually, he reached a moment of quiet resolution, a gentle diminuendo that seemed to signal the end without abruptly cutting the flow. The last notes lingered in the air, a soft echo that made the silence that followed feel profound. The room stayed still for a moment, everyone taking in the significance of what they had just experienced. It was more than music. It was a glimpse into a life, a mind and a soul rarely seen by others. And in that stillness, the power of the moment was fully realized as he lifted his hands from the keys. There was a collective intake of breath, a quiet acknowledgement that something rare and beautiful had occurred. People exchanged looks, eyes wide with admiration and wonder, hearts filled with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and affection. The simple act of sitting at the piano and playing had transformed the ordinary evening into something unforgettable. It was not about performance or skill, but about the truth and authenticity that resonated through every note. He looked up briefly, meeting the eyes of his friends, and saw the unspoken understanding, the pride and the love that radiated from them. The moment was theirs as much as it was his. They had created the space, set the stage, and now they were witnesses to a gift they could never have imagined. And though he remained humble, quiet, and reserved, something within him had shifted. For the first time in a long while, he had shared a piece of himself that was fully his own, and it had touched everyone around him in a profound way. The evening continued, with soft conversations and gentle laughter, but the magic of the piano lingered. The music had changed the atmosphere, leaving behind an invisible mark of connection and admiration. People spoke quietly, sharing their impressions, recounting feelings that were difficult to put into words. Every person present carried a personal memory of the music, a fragment of the moment that would remain with them long after the night ended. He returned to his seat among the guests eventually, a quiet smile on his face, still absorbing the reactions, the warmth, and the presence of those he cared about. The piano had spoken, and in doing so had transformed a simple gathering into an experience that none would forget. The quiet man at the piano had revealed his true self, not through speech but through music, and in that revelation, he had given everyone a gift far greater than any expectation. It was a night where ordinary life met extraordinary expression, and all who were present would carry the memory with them forever. The music filled the room with a warmth. Bass seemed to wrap around everyone present. Each note carried a depth that went beyond melody. It was emotion made audible, a language that everyone understood even without knowing its source. People found themselves leaning closer, drawn in by the delicate beauty of the performance. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound carry them to memories long forgotten or emotions they had not allowed themselves to feel in years. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a vessel for connection, a bridge between souls. As the music unfolded, subtle reactions spread through the room. A woman sitting near the corner dabbed at her eyes, trying not to let tears fall too quickly. She remembered mornings with a loved one who had passed, mornings filled with quiet conversations and soft laughter. The notes on the piano echoed those feelings, stirring a mix of joy and sorrow that made her heart ache in the gentlest way. A man across the room, who had always struggled to express himself, felt a lump in his throat as memories of missed opportunities and lost time pressed against him. He could not speak, but the music seemed to understand him, to say the things he could not put into words. Others were smiling softly, memories surfacing in a tender wave. Childhood moments, moments of triumph and failure, moments of simple happiness that had been buried under the routine of daily life, all came alive again. The room seemed to breathe in unison, the collective silence forming a cocoon around the shared experience. No one moved unnecessarily, no one whispered. The music commanded attention without demanding it. It was not a performance to be applauded, but a gift to be received and felt. The man at the piano was lost in his own world, yet aware of the quiet awe surrounding him. He had played countless times before, in solitude and in practice, but never like this. Never had he felt the room respond with such presence, such genuine emotion. Each note was deliberate, yet free, a reflection of his inner thoughts, fears, joys, and regrets. The piano allowed him to speak without words, and in doing so, it reached every heart in the room. Even those who had come with casual expectations now felt themselves transformed. Touched by something they could not fully describe, a friend near the piano felt tears streak down her cheeks. She had always known him as quiet, reserved, almost untouchable in his simplicity. Yet in this moment, the layers of his life revealed themselves through music. She thought about times he had quietly helped others, offered kindness without recognition, and simply been present. Now, she understood that the music was an extension of all that. It was his unspoken voice, a reflection of the depth and sensitivity he carried within. She felt both humbled and honored to witness it. The melody shifted gently, introducing a hint of melancholy that seemed to stir the room even more. The notes spoke of losses endured, challenges faced alone, and moments of quiet courage. Eyes glistened with tears, hands pressed against hearts, and for a time, the room was united in emotion without a single word exchanged. The music had opened doors to feelings that had long been kept locked, allowing everyone to step inside their own memories while still being connected to the shared experience. Children at the party, who had been quietly fidgeting before, became still, captivated by the sound. They did not fully understand the depth of the emotions, but they felt the beauty and the attention it commanded. Parents glanced at them, noticing the way they had grown quiet, the way their faces softened. The music reached across generations, uniting them in a moment of wonder and reflection. Even those who had rarely been in a room with such quiet intensity felt the pull, feeling part of something larger, something tender and human. The man at the piano allowed himself a small smile, acknowledging the effect without breaking the flow. He had never imagined that his music could touch people so deeply. Each chord, each subtle shift in tempo, each carefully chosen pause carried meaning beyond technical skill. It was honesty in sound, authenticity that spoke louder than words ever could. And in that honesty, everyone in the room felt both seen and understood. Even if only for a fleeting moment, stories from the past began to bubble up in conversation, whispered quietly between friends while he continued to play. They recalled small acts of kindness he had shown, moments where he had quietly made a difference, or instances where his presence had been a source of comfort. The music seemed to weave these memories into a tapestry of sound, connecting individual stories into a collective experience. The room was alive in a way that was gentle, powerful, and unforgettable. Some people felt tears welling up, not just for sadness, but for joy, for gratitude, for the realization that someone had lived a life of quiet beauty and was now sharing it so generously. They thought of lost loved ones, opportunities missed, and moments of laughter and love, all echoed in the notes of the piano. It was a reminder that life was fragile and precious, that emotions deserved to be felt fully, and that even a quiet life could carry profound impact. He moved through the piece with fluidity, not forcing the music, but allowing it to unfold naturally. Each hand movement, each chord struck, carried intention and feeling. The room leaned in closer without realizing it, hearts beating in subtle rhythm with the music. Some closed their eyes to focus entirely on sound and emotion, while others simply let the moment wash over them. There was no judgment, no expectation, just presence. The piano had created a shared space where vulnerability and beauty coexisted effortlessly. The night deepened, and the melodies shifted once again, now gentle, reflective, almost like a conversation with the past. He played not for admiration, but for connection, letting the music speak the words he could not say aloud. The friends who had planned the party watched quietly, hearts full of awe and affection. They had hoped to honor him, to show care and appreciation, but what they witnessed was far beyond what they imagined. It was a revelation, a gift, a moment that would linger in memory long after the music ended. At one point, a woman felt herself trembling slightly as memories of someone she had lost came to the surface. The music wrapped around her grief with tenderness, acknowledging the depth of her feelings without intrusion. She realized that the piano had a way of understanding the human heart, of giving voice to sorrow, love, joy, and reflection. The tears that fell were not of sadness alone, but of recognition, of shared humanity, and of the rare beauty of seeing someone express their soul so fully. Others quietly reached out to one another, sharing glances, smiles, and gentle touches. There was an unspoken understanding that they were all part of something extraordinary. The music had created a moment of collective intimacy, a space where people could feel emotions freely, where vulnerability was safe and shared. It was a rare kind of connection, one that transcended ordinary conversation, one that spoke directly to the heart. The man at the piano continued to play, unaware of the exact impact he was having. He was focused entirely on the music, allowing himself to feel deeply, to express what had long remained hidden. And in that expression, everyone in the room felt a part of his world. A glimpse into the quiet life of a man who had always observed more than he spoke. The piano had become a mirror, reflecting both the beauty of his own soul and the emotions of those who listened. As the piece drew toward a gentle close, a hush fell over the room. No one moved, no one spoke. The notes lingered in the air, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Everyone was suspended in the shared emotional experience, feeling the weight and the tenderness of the music. The room was filled with gratitude, awe, and a sense of connection that could not be easily described. It was a moment that would remain in memory, a night when ordinary life was touched by extraordinary expression. When the final notes faded, silence remained, not empty, but full. People slowly exhaled, blinking as if waking from a dream. Some wiped their eyes, others held hands or leaned toward each other in quiet comfort. There was no rush to speak, no need to break the spell. They understood that they had witnessed something rare, something that would stay with them indefinitely. The quiet man at the piano had shared a piece of himself that would be remembered. Not for grandeur or skill, but for the honesty, emotion, and vulnerability he revealed. He lowered his hands and looked around the room, taking in the reactions. There was a warmth that radiated from everyone, a mix of admiration, love, and gratitude. They had seen him as quiet, reserved, and ordinary. But in this moment, they understood the depth of his soul. The piano had spoken for him, and through it, he had connected with each person present in a way words could never achieve. The evening continued softly, with gentle conversations, laughter, and reflection. But the memory of the music lingered, leaving an invisible thread of emotion binding everyone together. It was a night of tears, memories, and understanding. A night where the ordinary became extraordinary through the simple yet profound power of music. The night slowly moved toward its end. Yet the warmth and energy lingered in the room. People began to settle into quieter conversations, the hum of voices soft but full of shared meaning. The piano had stopped, but the resonance of the music remained in the hearts of everyone present. It was as if the room itself had been changed, transformed by the presence of the man at the piano and the honesty of his gift. The simple gathering had become a legendary night, one that everyone would remember for a lifetime. The man, still seated near the piano, looked around at the faces of friends, family, and acquaintances. Their expressions were soft, eyes reflecting the emotions they had just felt. And he felt a sense of connection that was new and overwhelming. He had never realized how deeply people could be affected by something he considered private, something he had always done quietly for himself. The realization filled him with a quiet pride and a humility that coexisted in perfect balance. He had shared a part of himself without words, and the response was a silent, yet powerful acknowledgement of who he truly was. People approached him, one by one, offering gentle words of admiration and gratitude. Each statement was heartfelt, each smile warm, yet none of it felt like praise or flattery. It was recognition of his depth, his thoughtfulness, and the beauty he carried quietly within. Some shared memories that his music had stirred, recalling moments of laughter, comfort, or understanding that he had provided in ways they had never fully acknowledged before. Others expressed how moved they were by the honesty and vulnerability in his playing. Each interaction was small but significant, a thread connecting him more firmly to the people around him. He responded quietly, nodding, smiling softly, or offering a gentle word in return. He did not need to say much. His presence, the music, and the sincerity in his demeanor spoke volumes. In the past, he had often felt unnoticed, a quiet figure on the edge of social circles, but now, in this intimate moment, he understood that his life had touched more hearts than he had ever realized. The piano had been the bridge, allowing him to communicate in a way that transcended conversation. It had revealed the extraordinary depth of an ordinary life. Some guests lingered near the piano, unwilling to break the spell entirely. They asked quietly about the pieces he had played, about how he had learned, and about what inspired him. He answered softly, sharing small details without fanfare, allowing glimpses into his personal world. It was not a performance to be analyzed or critiqued, but a conversation through music that had already spoken more profoundly than words ever could. People listened attentively, grateful for the chance to understand even a fraction of the man they thought they knew. The atmosphere of the room remained warm and intimate. People shared laughter over small stories, reflections on life, and gentle teasing that only strengthened their connection. Yet beneath the light conversation, there was a shared awareness of something exceptional that had just occurred. The music had drawn out feelings that were often hidden in daily life, moments of introspection, empathy, and gratitude. It had made the ordinary evening remarkable, turning simple human presence into a lasting memory. One friend approached, smiling softly, and said, quietly but clearly, that the night had been unforgettable. Others nodded in agreement, speaking of the music and the impact it had made on them personally. The man felt a sense of wonder at the effect of his quiet life expressed in sound. He had lived modestly, kept to routines, and avoided attention. Yet in this moment, he realized the profound influence one person could have when authenticity was allowed to shine. The piano had been his voice, and through it, he had left a lasting mark. Some people lingered in reflection, looking around the room at the